Leo never wanted to be a hero. He wasn't a soldier, a spy, or even an important politician. He was just an engineer, a guy who fixed broken things. But now, standing in a massive alien warship, facing a 20-foot-tall alien warlord, he wondered if this was how his life would end. The Zelkeri Empire was the most feared force in the galaxy. Their warriors were giants, their ships unstoppable, and their warlords ruled through strength alone. When they attacked Earth, humanity had no choice but to surrender. The Earth Federation had fought bravely, but they were no match for the battle-hardened warriors of Zelkeri. As part of the peace agreement, the Zelkeri demanded a tribute, a sign of Earth's surrender. They didn't want money or resources. They wanted a human. And somehow, that human was Leo. A random choice. Leo still didn't understand why he had been chosen. Maybe it was bad luck. Maybe his name had come up in some random selection program. One minute, he had been repairing a defense grid in New London, and the next, soldiers had taken him away, saying he was to be given to the Zelkeri warlord. His friends had looked at him with pity. No one expected him to return. Everyone knew what the Zelkeri did to their enemies. Some said they used them for experiments. Others believed they were eaten. Whatever the truth was, Leo knew his fate was not in his hands anymore. Now, standing inside the grand warship of Warlord Varax, the Unbreakable, Leo tried not to shake as she stepped toward him. The warlord's judgment. The throne room was huge, made of dark metal and glowing symbols. Varax, the supreme commander of the Zelkeri fleet, sat on an enormous throne of bone and steel. She was unlike anything Leo had ever seen. Her skin was dark silver, with thick armored plates covering her arms and legs. Her eyes burned red, like molten fire. Long, sharp claws rested at her sides, and her black war armor was decorated with the skulls of past enemies. Leo was nothing compared to her. He was a small, fragile human, a weak creature standing before a titan of war. Varax studied him with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Then she spoke, her voice deep and commanding. "This is the tribute." A murmur went through the room. Several Zelkeri warriors standing nearby chuckled. They expected something stronger, a challenge, a fighter. But instead, they got this. Leo swallowed. His mouth was dry. He had no idea what to say. What was he supposed to do? Bow? Speak? Beg for mercy? Before he could decide, Varax suddenly reached out and picked him up. Leo yelped as her massive hand closed around his waist. It wasn't painful, but it was effortless, like a human lifting a small animal. She held him up to her face, staring at him like a scientist examining a strange new creature. "So small," she muttered. The warriors laughed again. Leo, still dangling in her grip, felt his face heat up in embarrassment. She turned him slightly, looking at him from different angles. Was she inspecting him? Then, to Leo's shock, she smirked. "I like him. Not a prisoner, not a slave. But what?" Leo blinked in confusion. That was not what he expected. The warriors seemed surprised too. One of them stepped forward. "Warlord, surely this is not worthy of you." "Silence," Varax said, her voice sharp as a blade. She turned her attention back to Leo. "You are mine now." Leo's stomach dropped. He had expected death, or imprisonment. But this, what did she mean? Before he could ask, Varax carried him away, her heavy footsteps echoing through the chamber. The warriors watched in stunned silence as their leader left the throne room, holding her new prize. Leo wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that he had just been claimed by a massive alien warlord, or the fact that he had no idea what she planned to do with him. Leo still couldn't believe what had just happened. One moment, he was standing in front of Warlord Varax, expecting to be executed. The next, she had picked him up like a toy and declared, "You are mine now." Now he found himself inside a massive chamber, the ceiling so high he could barely see it. Strange alien symbols glowed on the walls, and a large throne-like chair stood at the center. This had to be Varax's personal quarters. She dropped him, not roughly, but without much care, onto a platform that was clearly not designed for humans. It was too large, too high, like a table that could fit an entire dinner feast. Leo scrambled to sit up, his heart still pounding. Varax stood over him, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. "You are not what I expected," she said. Leo swallowed hard. "Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting to be here either." Her glowing red eyes narrowed slightly. "You do not fear me." Leo wanted to say, "Of course I do," but something about the way she looked at him made him hesitate. If he showed too much weakness, she might lose interest. If he acted too brave, she might think he was challenging her. So, he settled for the truth. "I don't know what you want from me." Varax let out a deep chuckle. "Good. Confusion is better than blind fear." She turned away, removing the heavy bone-plated armor from her arms. Leo noticed the scars across her dark silver skin, proof of countless battles. She moved with confidence, the way a warrior who had never lost should. Then she glanced back at him. "What are you?" Leo frowned. "What do you mean?" "Humans are weak," she said simply. "Small, fragile, but your people still fought. You knew you could not win, yet you resisted. Why?" Leo stared at her. Was this curiosity? Was she trying to understand humanity? He hesitated, then answered, "Because we don't like being controlled. Even if we lose, we fight for our freedom." Varax tilted her head. "Foolish." Leo crossed his arms. "Maybe, but it's who we are." For a long moment, she studied him in silence. Then, without another word, she walked over to a control panel and tapped a few glowing symbols. A metal door slid open, and two large Zelkari warriors entered. Leo tensed. Varax gestured toward him. "Prepare him." Leo's stomach dropped. Prepare him for what? What am I to her? Before Leo could protest, the two warriors lifted him up, one grabbing his arms, the other securing his legs. "Hey, let go of me," he shouted, struggling, but it was useless. Compared to these giants, he had no chance. Varax watched with amusement. "Relax, human. You are no longer a soldier. You are my possession now." Leo gritted his teeth. "I'm not a thing." She smirked. "Then prove you are more." Before he could ask what that meant, the warriors carried him into another room. Inside, alien machines scanned him, strange robotic arms adjusting the clothes they gave him. Lightweight, but clearly designed for comfort, not combat. It hit him then. She wasn't treating him like a prisoner. She wasn't torturing him or locking him in a cell. She was treating him like a pet. Or worse, a trophy. A strange new life. When the warriors were done, they'd brought him back. Varax, now sitting on her massive throne-like chair, rested her chin on her hand. Leo crossed his arms. "So, what happens now?" "Now," she said, "you entertain me." Leo blinked. "What?" She leaned forward. "You are mine. That means you will amuse me. You will speak when I command. You will share your strange human knowledge. You will make yourself useful. If you do not, I will find a better use for you." Leo shivered at her words. Was this some kind of test? He clenched his fists. He was an engineer, not a warrior. He couldn't fight his way out of this. But maybe, just maybe, he could outthink his way out. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. If she wanted entertainment, then he would give her something unexpected. He would show her that humans were not weak. They were clever. And maybe, just maybe, he could turn this from captivity into something else. Something he could control. Leo sat on the massive platform in Warlord Varax's chamber, his mind racing. He wasn't a prisoner, not exactly. He wasn't a slave either. No chains held him, and no one was forcing him to fight. But he wasn't free. Varax had claimed him. He was a trophy, a sign of her victory over Earth. And now, she expected him to amuse her. Leo had no idea how long he had been in this alien palace. There were no windows, no clocks, just the ever-present hum of technology and the cold, dark walls covered in glowing symbols. Varax, seated on her throne-like chair, watched him with curiosity. "Tell me, human," she said, "what are you good at?" Leo blinked. "What? You are small, weak. Your kind cannot match us in strength for battle. So what use are you?" Leo gritted his teeth. There it was again. Weak, fragile, small. He had to be careful how he answered. If she thought he was useless, he might lose whatever small advantage he had. He took a slow breath. "I fix things." Varax raised an eyebrow. "Fix?" Leo nodded. "I'm an engineer. I understand machines. I repair them, improve them, make them better." She tilted her head slightly. "And you think that is impressive?" Leo smirked. "I think it's more impressive than lifting things and breaking them." The room fell silent. The Zelkeri warriors standing nearby tensed, expecting their warlord to crush him for such an insult. But instead, Varax let out a deep, amused chuckle. Brave words for something so small. Leo let out a slow breath. He had taken a risk, but it had paid off. She didn't see him as a threat. Not yet. She leaned back, resting her chin on her hand. "Very well. Little engineer, prove your worth." A broken machine. Minutes later, Leo found himself in a vast engine room, surrounded by towering machines that pulsed with strange alien energy. Zelkeri engineers worked around him, their heavy armor clanking as they moved. Varax stood nearby, arms crossed. "This ship has a problem," she said. "A power fluctuation in the reactor core. My engineers have not solved it. If you are as clever as you claim, fix it." Leo stared at the machinery. He had no idea how Zelkeri technology worked. The energy pulses were different from anything on Earth. But he wasn't about to say that. Instead, he stepped forward, studying the flickering lights and listening to the rhythmic hum of the reactor. He placed a hand on the console, feeling the vibrations. Something was off. He followed the power cables, tracing their path until he found a section where the energy flickered unevenly. That had to be the problem. Taking a deep breath, he pointed. "There. That conduit is overloading. The energy isn't flowing properly." One of the Zelkeri engineers scoffed. "We checked that. It is fine." Leo shook his head. "No, it's not. It looks fine, but the power is building up too fast in one section before being released. It's like water trying to rush through a blocked pipe. Eventually, it's going to burst." Varax watched closely. "And how do you fix it?" Leo hesitated. If he got this wrong, he would lose all credibility. Then he saw a control panel nearby, filled with strange symbols. He had been watching the Zelkeri engineers press certain symbols, and he had an idea of how the controls worked. Slowly, carefully, he pressed a series of buttons. The machine rumbled. The lights flickered. Then, the energy stabilized. A deep hum filled the room, steady and strong. The power fluctuations were gone. For a moment, no one spoke. The Zelkeri engineers stared in disbelief. Then Varax let out a deep, satisfied laugh. "Interesting. A shift in power." Leo stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had done it. Varax stepped forward, looking down at him. "Perhaps you are not as useless as I thought." Leo smirked. "Told you." She tilted her head, her red eyes glowing. "You are still weak." Leo crossed his arms. "And yet, I just fixed a problem your warriors couldn't." Silence. Then, Varax smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just discovered something very, very interesting. "I like you, human," she said. You are small, but your mind is sharp. I will keep you. Leo's stomach dropped. Keep him. Before he could argue, Varax turned and left the room, her long strides making the floor tremble. One of the Zelkeri engineers muttered something in their language. Another gave Leo a look that was half respect, half annoyance. Leo sighed. He had proved his worth, but he had also made himself more valuable to Varax. She wasn't going to let him go. And now she was truly paying attention. Leo had no idea if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. Leo had fixed the reactor problem. He should have been relieved. But instead, as he followed Warlord Varax back to her massive chamber, he felt something far worse than fear. He had made himself valuable. Now she wasn't going to let him go. Varax walked with slow, confident steps, her massive form casting long shadows in the dimly lit hallways. Her Zelkeri warriors stepped aside as she passed, some giving Leo quick glances, half curious, half amused. It was clear they still didn't respect him. To them, he was just a small, fragile human who had gotten lucky. But to Varax, Leo wasn't sure what he was to her anymore. A new kind of prison. Back in her grand chamber, Varax took her place on her throne-like chair. She leaned back, watching him with those burning red eyes. You have earned a place, little human. Leo crossed his arms, a place where. Her smirk deepened. By my side. His stomach tightened. Not good. Varax continued. You are mine now. Not just as a tribute, but as something more. You have proved your worth. You will continue to prove it. Leo frowned. So, what? Am I your pet? Your servant? Her eyes glowed brighter. You are my human. Leo blinked. That doesn't explain anything. Varax chuckled. It means you will be treated better than a prisoner. You will have food, shelter, and protection. You will work on my ship, fixing what is broken. And you will answer to me alone. Leo felt a cold realization settle in. She wasn't keeping him locked up, but that didn't mean he was free. He was still trapped. Still under her control. A challenge from the warriors. Before Leo could respond, the chamber doors slid open. A Zelkeri warrior stepped inside. A towering, heavily armored alien with deep scars across his chest. He knelt before Varax, pounding his fist to his chest in salute. Warlord, the warrior said, his voice deep and sharp. This human is weak. He has no place among us. Leo tensed. Great. Another giant who wanted to crush him. Varax raised an eyebrow. Do you challenge my decision? The warrior hesitated. Then he said, I do not question your will, Warlord. But this creature does not deserve your favor. He turned his glowing yellow eyes toward Leo. Let him prove his strength in combat. Leo's heart skipped a beat. Oh no. Nope. Absolutely not. But Varax looked interested. She turned to Leo. What do you say, little engineer? Leo took a slow breath. His brain worked fast. He had no chance against a Zelkeri warrior in a fight. He would last 2 seconds before being knocked out, or worse. But fighting wasn't the only way to win. Leo smirked. You want me to prove my strength? He gestured toward the massive warrior. Fine. Let's fight. The warrior grinned, his sharp teeth gleaming. He was ready to crush Leo. Varax tilted her head, watching closely. Leo took a step forward, then turned and ran. Winning without fighting. Gasps filled the room as Leo sprinted toward the nearest stack of metal crates. The warrior laughed. You run like prey. He charged after Leo, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. Leo didn't stop. He jumped onto the crates, climbing higher. The warrior followed, but Leo was smaller, faster. When the warrior lunged, Leo leaped to the side, and the warrior slammed into the crates, knocking them over. Leo hit the ground and rolled, just as the towering crates crashed down on the warrior. The room fell silent. The warrior groaned, trapped under the heavy metal. He wasn't hurt, but he couldn't move easily. Leo stood up, dusting himself off. He turned to Varax. "I win." She blinked. Then, slowly, a deep rumbling laugh escaped her lips. She was impressed. A new level of respect. Varax stood, her red eyes glowing with amusement. "Clever." Leo crossed his arms. "You never said I had to beat him in a fistfight. You just said I had to win." She let out another laugh. "You truly are different from the others." She stepped forward and placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, not in a threatening way, but in a way that almost felt like approval. "You are still weak," she said, "but you are not stupid, and that is more valuable than strength alone." Leo let out a slow breath. He had survived. Again. More than that, he had earned a little more respect. But he wasn't safe yet. Varax was still watching him closely. She still saw him as something interesting, something to be studied. And as long as she thought that, she was never going to let him go. Leo had won the challenge. Not with strength, but with his mind. The Zelkari warriors had watched in silence as their fellow warrior pulled himself out from under the heavy crates, grumbling in embarrassment. No one had expected the tiny human to win. Not like that. But Varax? She had laughed. A deep, rumbling laugh of amusement and approval. Leo didn't know if that was a good thing or a very bad thing. A dangerous conversation. After the fight, Varax led him back to her private chamber, a massive, dimly lit space lined with strange alien banners and weapons. The air smelled of metal, fire, and something else Leo couldn't name. She sat on her throne-like chair and gestured for him to stand before her. "You are full of surprises, human." Leo sighed. "Yeah, well, staying alive is a great motivator." She smirked. "Most creatures in your position would cower. Beg. Submit." She leaned forward, red eyes glowing. "But not you." Leo shrugged. "I like breathing. So yeah, I do what I have to." She watched him in silence for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me something, human. Do you fear me?" Leo swallowed. That was a loaded question. If he said yes, she would see him as weak. If he said no, she might test him in ways he wouldn't survive. So instead, he answered carefully, "I respect you." Varax raised an eyebrow. "Respect." Leo nodded. "I'm not stupid. You could crush me in a second if you wanted to. But you don't." He folded his arms. "You don't want weak things near you. You want things that challenge you. That interest you." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't deny it. Leo took a deep breath. "Time to take a risk." "I know I'm valuable to you," he said. "I fix things. I think differently. That's why you haven't thrown me in a cage or killed me. You're keeping me because I'm useful." Varax chuckled. "You are bold, human." "I have to be." Leo took another step forward. "But I don't want to just be a pet." Asterisk, asterisk. Her expression shifted, slightly curious. "Then what do you want?" she asked. "A dangerous bargain." Leo hesitated. He had one chance to say this right. "I want a deal," he said. Varax tilted her head. "A deal." Leo nodded. "You let me work freely. I'll fix things on your ship. Improve them. I'll be useful to you. But in return, I want some freedom." She stared at him for a long moment. Leo's heart pounded. If she saw this as disrespect, she might end him right here. But then, she smiled. It was a slow, dangerous smile. Interesting. She leaned back, thinking, "You are not a warrior. You are not a slave. You are not a Zelkari." Her red eyes locked onto his. "You want freedom," she mused. "Then prove you deserve it." Leo tensed. "What do you mean?" Varax smirked. "You claim to be useful. Then be useful. My ship is powerful, but not perfect. There are problems. Fix them." Leo frowned. "And if I do?" Her smirk deepened. Then we will talk about your freedom. Leo exhaled slowly. It wasn't a promise. Not really. But it was something. A chance. And that was more than he had before. The first test. Leo didn't waste time. If he wanted even a little control over his life, he needed to show his worth. Varax led him to another part of the ship, a massive hall filled with Zelkari engineers working on a large piece of machinery. Sparks flew as they welded metal, their deep voices rumbling in their alien language. Varax gestured to the machine. This is the main shield generator. It has been malfunctioning for weeks. My warriors cannot fix it. Leo glanced at the massive device. It was covered in glowing blue circuits, humming with unstable energy. Something was off. He stepped closer, touching the metal. He could feel the vibrations, the uneven pulses of power. Then he saw it, a small but critical flaw in the energy conduits. The Zelkari engineers had been repairing the wrong part. Leo turned to Varax. I can fix this. She raised an eyebrow. Then do it. Leo got to work. He rerouted the power, adjusted the cooling system, and recalibrated the control panel. Minutes later, the machine hummed smoothly. The flickering energy stabilized. The Zelkari engineers stared in disbelief. Varax folded her arms, watching him with a thoughtful expression. Finally, she spoke. Impressive. Leo wiped sweat from his forehead. So, do I get my deal? Varax stepped forward. Not yet. Leo's stomach dropped. What? But I fixed it. She smirked. One success does not earn you freedom. If you truly want to stand among the Zelkari, you must prove yourself again. Leo sighed. Of course, it wasn't going to be that easy. But he had taken the first step. Now, he just had to survive whatever came next. Leo had fixed the shield generator. It should have been enough. But Varax wasn't satisfied. She wanted more. Leo stood in front of her in the massive, dimly lit chamber. The Zelkari warriors watched from the sides, their glowing eyes filled with silent judgment. Varax sat on her throne-like chair, arms crossed. You have proved that your hands are useful, she said, but can you prove your spirit is strong? Leo frowned. You mean another test? She smirked. Of course, strength is not just in the body or the mind. It is in the will. Leo sighed. All right. What do I have to do? Varax stood up, her towering form casting a long shadow over him. You will face the trial of fire. A deadly arena. Leo was led through the ship's winding corridors until they reached a massive chamber, a large, circular arena with a deep pit in the center, filled with molten metal. Great. Lava. Because of course. On the other side of the arena stood a Zelkari warrior, taller and bulkier than the others. His skin was dark red, his armor covered in claw marks and scorch burns. He looked at Leo and grinned. Varax's voice echoed through the chamber. The trial of fire is simple, human. Survive. Leo's heart pounded. Survive. What exactly? The warrior on the other side slammed his fist against his chest. A mechanical device on the walls activated, and suddenly, pillars of flame erupted from the ground, cutting off escape routes. Leo's stomach twisted. This wasn't a fight. It was a game of survival. The warrior lunged, running from death. Leo dove to the side, just as a massive fist smashed into the ground where he had been standing. The force of the impact sent cracks through the metal floor. Too strong, too fast. Leo had to think. He sprinted toward one of the raised platforms, jumping onto it just as another pillar of fire shot up behind him. The heat was intense, making sweat drip down his face. The warrior stomped after him, unaffected by the fire. Leo's mind raced. He couldn't beat this guy in a fight. But the environment, that was something he could use. His eyes darted across the arena, analyzing the pattern of flames. There was a rhythm, a pattern to the bursts of fire. He could use it. A clever escape. The warrior lunged at Leo again, But this time, Leo didn't run. Instead, he sidestepped at the last second, right as a column of fire shot up between them. The flames engulfed the warrior's arm, and he let out a roar of pain, staggering back. Leo didn't stop. He kept moving, leading the warrior toward more fire traps, making him stumble again and again. Finally, the warrior made a mistake. He stepped onto a platform, just as the fire erupted beneath it. The explosion sent him flying backward, slamming into the arena wall. He collapsed, groaning. Silence filled the chamber. Then, a deep, rumbling laugh. Leo turned. Varax was grinning. A warrior's recognition. She stepped forward, her red eyes glowing with approval. "You surprised me again, human." Leo wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Varax turned to her warriors. "You all doubted him. You thought he was weak." She gestured to the fallen warrior. "Yet he stands, and your brother does not." The warriors murmured, watching Leo with new eyes. Not as a prisoner, not as a weakling, but as something else. Leo took a deep breath. He had survived. Again. And now, he had their respect. Leo had survived the trial of fire. Not by brute strength, not by luck, but by using his mind. And now, the Zelkeri warriors looked at him differently. Before, he had been a weak outsider, a prisoner taken as tribute. Now, he was something else, something interesting. Varax stood before her warriors, her red eyes burning with approval. The human has proven himself. The warriors rumbled in agreement. Some still looked doubtful, but others nodded in respect. Leo crossed his arms. "So, does that mean I get my deal now?" Varax smirked. "You are bold, human." Leo sighed. Yeah, I get that a lot." A new mission. Varax motioned for Leo to follow her. They left the arena, walking down the massive corridors of the ship. The walls pulsed with a faint alien energy. The air was thick with the scent of metal and fire. Leo glanced up at her. "So, where are we going?" She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "You want freedom. You want a deal." Leo nodded. Yeah, that was the whole point. Varax stopped and turned to face him. "Then I have a proposition for you." Leo frowned. "I don't like the sound of that." She smirked. "You are clever. You are useful. But I need more than tricks and repairs." She leaned closer, her massive form towering over him. "I need someone who can help me win a war. The war for power." Leo blinked. "War? What war?" Varax narrowed her eyes. "The Zelkeri Empire is vast, but it is not united." She continued walking, and Leo followed, listening carefully. "Many warlords fight for power," she said. "They all want the throne. They all want to rule. But I am different." Leo raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Varax looked at him, her gaze intense. "I do not seek power for myself. I seek order, strength, a future where the Zelkeri are not just conquerors, but rulers of something greater." Leo exhaled. "Okay, and where do I come in?" She smirked. "You are human. Your kind is known for unpredictability. You think in ways we do not. That is why I kept you alive." Leo snorted. "Wow, thanks. I feel so special." She ignored his sarcasm. "I need someone to help me outthink my enemies, to build better weapons, better defenses, to give me an advantage they will not expect." Leo hesitated. This was big. This wasn't just about fixing broken machines anymore. This was about choosing sides in an alien war. A risky decision. Leo rubbed the back of his neck. "And if I say no?" Varax's expression didn't change. "Then you will remain a guest on my ship, comfortable, but limited." Leo narrowed his eyes. "So, still a prisoner?" She didn't deny it. Leo sighed. "And if I help you?" Varax smiled. "Then you will have freedom. True freedom. You will stand beside me, not as a servant, but as an ally." Leo stared at her. Ally. That was a big word. He wasn't stupid. He knew this was dangerous. If he helped her, he would make powerful enemies. But, for the first time since he had been taken, he saw a way forward. A way to survive. Maybe even a way to win. Leo took a deep breath. "All right." Varax raised an eyebrow. "You accept?" Leo nodded. "Yeah. I'll help you. But I have conditions." Her smirk widened. "Of course you do, human." Leo folded his arms. "I want my own space. My own tools. And I want a say in how things are done." Varax chuckled. "Agreed." Leo exhaled. He had just made the biggest gamble of his life. Now he just had to survive long enough to see how it played out. Leo had made his choice. He was no longer just a prisoner. Now he was an ally of Varax, the towering Zelkeri warlord. But that also meant he had stepped into a war far bigger than himself. A plan for war. Leo stood in the strategy chamber of the ship. A large, glowing hologram floated in the center of the room, displaying a massive battlefield in space, a star system on the edge of Zelkeri territory. Varax stood beside him, arms crossed. Around them, her commanders watched in silence. She pointed to a planet on the map. "Our enemy is War Chief Zorvek. He controls this system. He is ruthless, but predictable." Leo studied the hologram. "All right. So what's the plan?" One of the Zelkeri commanders stepped forward. "We attack head-on. We crush them." Leo sighed. "Of course you do." Varax raised an eyebrow. "You disagree?" Leo nodded. "Yeah. If you attack like that, you'll lose half your fleet before you even land." The commanders growled in protest, but Varax held up a hand. "Explain." Leo pointed at the map. "Look at this. Zorvek knows you'll come straight for him. So he's got heavy defenses in place, automated cannons, fighter patrols, reinforced shields. You'll be walking into a death trap." Varax smirked. "Then what do you suggest, human?" Leo grinned. "We trick him. The human way." Leo's plan was simple, but dangerous. Instead of a full attack, they would fake a retreat, making it seem like Varax was too weak to fight. Then, while Zorvek's forces celebrated, Leo and a small team would sneak past the defenses and sabotage their main command center. Without leadership, the enemy forces would fall apart. One of the commanders snorted. "A coward's plan." Leo rolled his eyes. "No, it's called strategy. You guys love fighting, but you don't always think about the long game." The commander snarled and took a step forward, but Varax chuckled. "Enough. I like this plan." She turned to Leo. "You will lead the strike team." Leo froze. "Wait, what? Me? I thought I was just the idea guy." Varax smirked. "You want a say in how things are done. Then prove your plan works." Leo sighed. "Great. I really need to stop talking." A risky infiltration. Leo sat inside a stealth shuttle, flying toward Zorvek's main command center. With him were 3 Zelkeri warriors, each armed with massive energy weapons. They were big, armored, and ready for battle. Leo, on the other hand, had a toolkit and a stolen enemy uniform. Perfect. The plan was simple. Leo would sneak inside, disable the security systems, and signal the Zelkeri warriors to attack. As the shuttle approached, Leo took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." The ship landed near the command center. Leo stepped out, his disguise in place. The massive fortress loomed ahead, guarded by enemy soldiers. Keeping his head down, he walked toward the entrance, trying to act natural. An unexpected problem. Leo's disguise worked, at first. He passed through the security gates and entered the main control room. The massive computers in front of him controlled the planetary defenses. Just as he reached for his toolkit, a voice called out, "You, what are you doing here?" Leo turned slowly. A Zelkari officer stood behind him, suspicion in his eyes. Leo smiled awkwardly. Fixing the problem. The officer narrowed his eyes. I don't recognize you. Leo's mind raced. Think, think, think. Then he spotted something. A cup of alien coffee sitting on a nearby table. Leo grabbed it and threw it in the officer's face. The alien howled in surprise, stumbling backward. Leo didn't wait. He rushed to the controls and pressed every button he could. The alarms blared. Leo grabbed his communicator. Guys, I think I messed up. You might want to hurry. Chaos and victory. The Zelkari warriors smashed through the walls, weapons blazing. Leo ducked behind cover as explosions filled the room. Enemy soldiers fired back, but they were caught off guard. Leo rushed to the main control panel. He connected his toolkit and quickly hacked into the system. The defenses shut down. The automated turrets powered off. The planetary shields collapsed. Varax's fleet, waiting in orbit, launched their attack. Leo grinned. That's how you do it, boys. One of the warriors gave him a respectful nod. Leo collapsed into a chair, exhaling. He had survived. Again. And Varax had won the first battle. But the war wasn't over yet. Leo had done it. The enemy's defenses were down, and Varax's fleet had launched their attack. The battle outside was fierce. Warships clashed. Explosions filled space, and the once powerful war chief Zorvek was now on the defensive. But inside the command center, Leo wasn't celebrating yet, because Zorvek himself had just arrived. A dangerous enemy. The doors slammed open, and in walked War Chief Zorvek. He was bigger than Varax. His armor was dark, his red eyes filled with rage. His heavy boots echoed through the chamber. Leo gulped. Hey there. Zorvek didn't respond. He simply drew his weapon, a massive, glowing energy blade. Leo took a step back. Okay, I know what this looks like, but... Zorvek swung. Leo dove to the side, barely avoiding the strike. The blade sliced through metal like butter. This guy was fast. Too fast. Leo had no chance in a fight. So, he did what he did best. He ran. A desperate escape. Leo sprinted down the corridor, dodging falling debris as the battle raged. Behind him, Zorvek followed, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. Leo grabbed his communicator. Varax, I've got a problem. Her voice came through, calm but firm. What is it, human? Leo ducked as a blast of energy narrowly missed his head. Oh, nothing big. Just being chased by an angry warlord with a giant sword. Varax chuckled. You do have a talent for survival. Leo ran faster. Yeah, well, I'd like to keep that talent. Get me out of here. The final fight. Leo burst into a hangar bay. A small fighter ship sat in the center, engines humming. His only escape. But before he could reach it, Zorvek appeared. He stood in the doorway, blocking Leo's path. You are clever, human. But this is where your tricks end. Leo took a deep breath. He had one last move left. He looked at the fuel tanks near the ship. Then he looked at the control panel on the wall. Leo smirked. You know what? You talk too much. And with that, he slammed his fist onto the control panel. The fuel tanks exploded. The blast threw Zorvek backward, slamming him into the wall. The entire hangar shook. Leo jumped into the fighter ship and grabbed the controls. Engines roared. The ship lifted off. Leo hit the communicator. Varax, I'm coming up. Try not to shoot me down. Victory. Leo's fighter soared out of the hangar, just as the entire command center began to collapse. He flew through the battlefield, dodging enemy fire, until Varax's flagship opened its hangar doors. Leo landed hard, breathing heavily. The moment he stepped out, Varax was waiting. She crossed her arms. Took you long enough. Leo laughed. Oh, I'm sorry. Next time I'll schedule my near-death experience. Varax smirked. You did well, human. Outside, the enemy fleet was in full retreat. Zorvek's forces were broken. Varax had won. A new future. Later, on the command deck, Leo looked at the stars. Varax stood beside him. You could leave now, if you wish. Leo thought about it. For the first time, he actually had a choice. He could go home, find a way back to Earth. But he looked at the Zulkari warriors, at Varax. He had earned their respect. He had a purpose here. Leo grinned. Nah, I think I'll stick around. Varax chuckled. Good. I would hate to lose my best strategist. Leo smirked. And you'd miss me too. She rolled her eyes. Do not push your luck, human. Leo laughed. For the first time since being taken, he felt free. And he had an adventure waiting for him. The end.